guys, welcome. My name's Ben. This is UnchartedX. I've got another podcast for you all today. Sat down again with my good mate Chuck from the channel CF Apps 7865. I'm sure you all know him. We did a podcast not too long ago, but we thought we'd do a follow-up this time, taking a look at the Great Pyramid of Giza in a little bit more detail. It's just a casual conversation we were having using some of my footage as backdrop. It's a bit of an experiment in terms of how I was trying to pipe video and audio to Chuck, but I think it worked out. I've got quite a bit that I'm working on at the moment. I'm looking into a video about harmonic resonance. I'm putting that together. You can actually get a little bit of a taste of this because most of the footage is from inside the Great Pyramid and some of the sound is really, really awesome. So if you have a good set of headphones, this would be a good time to use it on this video. Looks like I'm going to be getting a chance to sit down and talk with Dr. Martin Sweatman. He's the author of a recent book that's just a paradigm shifter. It's called Prehistory Decoded. He's also put out a bunch of peer-reviewed papers, and all of this is based on an analysis of Göbekli Tepe. It's a super interesting topic. I'm really keen to sit down and talk to him, and I hope you guys will enjoy that. So drop the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, please do subscribe to Chuck's channel. He puts out great content. I have started a little new merchandise store. It's on my website. The details are on Teespring, mostly just because, I wanted to have shirts that said UnchartedX, and I've also done a couple of little things with the Serapeum. I'm planning to have a bit of fun making t-shirts. Again, mostly just so I can wear them, but I thought it might be a nice way that you can both support the channel and get something back for it. So that merch store is out there on my website. It's unchartedx.com. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Cheers. All right, well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm doing this on my channel on UnchartedX, and again, I'm joined by Chuck from the very popular YouTube channel CF Apps 7865. How you doing, Chuck?
Glad to join you tonight, Ben.
Yeah, it's a nice one. We're recording this on a balmy Thursday evening. And we thought what might be a nice thing is to get into some more detail. I know we did one of these earlier and we kind of ran over some background story and how we got into it, but a bunch of feedback from people said that this is great, let's do it again, which is what we're doing, and maybe look at some more topics in a little bit more detail. So we thought let's do that and go with one of the topics that's always near and dear to everybody's heart, which is the Great Pyramid at Giza.
A lot of questions and a lot of stuff we are wondering about.
This is true. Yeah, I've been in there a couple of times, and I thought as a background for this, what I'm trying to do is it's a bit of an experiment. I'm screen sharing with Chuck. I am looking at some of the raw footage from one of the trips that I've had there, and I'm also piping audio to Chuck. So hopefully we're going to look at some of this footage in the background from a visit there, and we can use that as kind of a springboard to talk about the various topics as we get into and look at the Great Pyramid. One thing for me that one of the reasons I wanted to do this topic is also just to mention Matt from Ancient Architects. He's done a couple of videos just recently on the Great Pyramid, on a couple of aspects of the Great Pyramid, things that I've actually seen and I have some footage of that is quite interesting. So it's kind of also a follow-up to some of the things that he's looked at recently.
A lot of us watch Matt's videos.
Yeah, he does a great job. All right. So it's just initially coming into Giza. I think I had to have a couple of clips here. So as you approach the Great Pyramid, maybe we can pause it and look at some of this as well in a little more detail if we want to. But one of the things that people always think about, I think, is the front entrance to the pyramid. And people look at it and look at these beveled blocks or these triangular blocks that are in the front of it and think that's the front entrance. That isn't actually the way that people gain an entryway into the Great Pyramid. You actually gain access through this thing called Mahmud's Hole, which is slightly down and just to the right of it. You can see there with the man standing in it, and we can kind of zoom in and take a quick look just for scale. This is actually what's known as Mahmud's Hole, which is the way that we gain access now.
Have you ever contemplated climbing the pyramid, or is that just kind of a risky business?
So it's an interesting story. I have. I just think we're a little too late in time. I think it's certainly been possible to do, and I think it's still probably possible to do. You run the risk though. I mean, there was a couple of years back, I remember a kid climbed it with a GoPro on his head, and it was
right.
Great little video, but I mean, you're definitely going to get yourself thrown out. Certainly of the Giza Plateau, if not the country itself. And for me, I'm like,
oh wow, okay.
I'm not sure on the profile. I mean, I just wouldn't want to risk the the wrath of the authorities by doing that. Although, I mean, plenty of people have climbed it. Graham's Hancock's climbed it a couple of times. He has this
Right.
lovely story about seeing his, I think it was his grandfather's signature. When it
Right,
was,
like 1916 or something like that. Yeah,
right.
incredible story there.
Yeah, and by all accounts, it's a beautiful view. I'd love to climb it. I love actually climbing mountains. I've climbed Kilimanjaro. I enjoy mountain climbing. I'm doing a backpacking trip to the Grand Canyon pretty soon here. But yeah, I love doing that sort of stuff. I'd love to do it if it was an opportunity to do it. But yeah, I think the only way you can do it these days is very sketchily.
Right, I
I'm not
assume maybe at night and
right. Yeah,
maybe, yeah.
meet us here at four
and those-
o'clock, and we'll just run around and bakshish all the guards, and away we go. But that's,
Right.
I mean, you could get a lot done in Egypt with that methodology, if you like. Like it's possible.
Sure.
Everything has a price ultimately, and I'm sure for the right money, you could probably still do this, and it would cost you a pretty penny, I'd imagine. But it's yeah, this is the one thing, this is the one thing I think people are looking for, and they would probably be like pretty keen on trying to stop people from doing this. Yeah. Honestly, if I had to burn just as an aside, if I had to burn my, wish list dollars in terms of getting into sea stuff, this probably wouldn't be what I'd choose. That's an interesting topic, actually. What would you go and choose and look at if you could look at any aspect of ancient Egypt? I'd choose something different to getting on top of the pyramid. I think there's a lot more interesting spots to look at.
Sure, sure. But that's something I've always wondered about since I've seen Graham's pictures and his story from up there. I wondered if that was even possible today.
Yeah, it's you'll get an offer. There's a lot of you get approached. There's one thing's for sure. I guess the locals aren't shy in coming forward with their proposals for either various wares or activities when you're in Egypt.
Yeah.
And ever since
Well,
the tours, sorry.
that view right there, I'm going up to Red Rock Canyon tomorrow, and there's a lot of cool places to climb. But right there, I'm just thinking I want to scamper up that thing right
Oh
there.
yeah. It looks very climbable, and it is. I think, and Graham actually tells you the story about the best way to climb it. I'd love to too. I wish they would allow people to do it, even if it was guided. I mean, they could make money doing this, and you're not going to hurt
Sure.
it. I mean,
Imagine there's some risk.
I'm sure there is. You could clip a line in. I guess I wouldn't mind if you put a line on it, but don't take 1,000 people. Make it expensive, I guess, and make it a special thing like they do with some of the tombs in the Valley of the
Right.
Kings, where they'll only open them up. But sometimes I've seen permissions. They'll be $100 or more, which is way more than. I mean, you can go on the Giza Plateau from memory. It's been a couple of years, but you go to the Giza Plateau. It's $20. It's like $10 or $15 maybe to get an entrance to the Great Pyramid. Just a ticket. But if you go to the Valley of the Kings, at some point, you can get some entrance to some tombs. They're hundreds of dollars just to get in there. Thankfully, at least they're letting people film now. But
Those look aged. Those
don't they?
rocks.
Yeah, that's the other form of limestone. And actually, that's interesting. I think I walked right up here. This actually goes. I forgot I did this. Actually, let me just change something real quick. Where we paused resolution full. So yeah, this is actually. So this goes up to those angled blocks that you saw from a distance. And this is an interesting area because this was where the Scan Pyramids project detected a void. So behind this wall, and this was always long suspected as being the wall. And there is a passageway that comes down from there. You actually see some of it from inside in Mahmud's hole because they dug behind this. And I think a story goes, and I'm not 100% familiar on this, but a story goes they heard the motion of a rock or something moved, which gave them the clue on where to dig and to mine into the pyramid. But there's actually a passageway, and I believe this is where the subterranean passageway comes out up here. But you actually intersect it through Mahmud's hole to get into it now, and you can see the granite plugs that are in the passageway that I think lead up to this door. And
Okay.
I think there's supposedly, because there's a void there may well be a room behind there. And I think that's what Matt talks about. There's a block in between these angled blocks that maybe we could drill through at some point and figure out.
There's a lot of room in that pyramid for other things to be found. Now, I've never been to Egypt, but I've been inside the Luxor pyramid here on the Strip, and that is all open. That is 8 stories smaller than the Great Pyramid. I mean, there's 1,000 rooms in there, and 4 nightclubs and a
Oh yeah.
dozen restaurants and a huge casino, and I just can't even. I mean, it just blows me away all the
It's
space that I can conceptualize inside of the pyramid, and just the little amount that we have still found. I think there is a lot to be found still in that place.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a huge area. Like that's the one thing that you don't until you get to Egypt and you are rolling through the city from the airport, probably heading towards Giza. And the first time you see the pyramids on the skyline, because you sort of it brings it home just how massive these things truly are. Like giant structures. They just
Right.
tower over modern skyscrapers and buildings. They pale into insignificance and just walking around it, it is something else, and it's so steep. It's just it's quite a
Right. And
it's a
I think when people talk about sites like Abu Ruwash and Zayat Al Aryan that
mm,
are 4.5 or 2.9 miles away from the Great Pyramid, and they kind of state it like they're a distance away, but if you're 3 miles from the Great Pyramid, it's right there.
right. Yeah,
Correct?
yeah, you see it. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yes.
it's on the it's a dominates the skyline from a long way away. And particularly just seeing it driving through the city. But from those other sites, you see it. I mean, you see it from Abu Sir, which is south of Saqqara, just slightly north of Dashur. But yeah,
Right. I
that's.
remember
Go ahead.
I remember Carmen Bolter up at Abu Rawash and looking south, and you can kind of see the line of each
Yeah,
pyramid site from, all the way down almost from Abu Rawash.
you can. It's an interesting. Luke and I talked about it once or twice as well. You can actually see from each pyramid site. You can see the other pyramid site that's next to it on the skyline,
Uh,
and you can actually the Great Pyramid is the one that you can see a little bit further away. Giza is the biggest, obviously, but I
uh,
mean the Red Pyramid is not far off it. But it's a weird thing. So from every side in that pyramid belt, you kind of have this visual distance, and on the horizon you'll see the next pyramid site over. So from Dashur, you can see Saqqara and the Step Pyramid, and from there you can, well, in between there is Abu Sir, Abu Ghurab. You can see both. You can see north from there to Giza, as well. So
all those places are almost individual topics in themselves.
aren't they? Yeah, I am planning on getting into all of them. In fact, I do want to do a video on this bit specifically because I think, and we'll play some sound later on in this as well, because I'm actually looking into resonance now as a topic because I've had some very interesting experiences from a resonance perspective in a lot of these sites, and particularly in some of the chambers around on the Giza plateau. Some of these chambers generate standing waves. It's just incredible phenomenon, and you can tell from some of the sound. You'll get some of it in this that obviously the acoustic properties are pretty astonishing inside these structures. Whether or not it's a functional or deliberate thing is highly debatable. Everybody's got an opinion on it. There's a lot of research being done in that area, which is encouraging. I think that's really the only path towards getting an answer. We've just got to do more research and figure it out.
Yep. And my research into the pyramids and everything that this lost civilization did, if you want to call it that, I think this place had multi purposes, and
Yep.
I think it could have had a function. I think it could have been had symbolic meaning all wrapped into one.
Yeah, I think it ticks a lot of those boxes. To me, there's got to be something functional about it. I think it's got an extremely nuanced history. I'm not even sure if it was always originally a pyramid. Maybe it was part of the
Right.
internal structure. Maybe that had a different function. The pyramid might have come later. You might even be talking about multiple episodes of what we would consider reasonably high technology civilizations. It's really hard to say. So you can hear this, Chuck.
Yep.
So this is just strolling through Mahmud's hole. It's a little shaky because they take all of the fancy gear off you the second you walk in. But they tell you no filming. I mean, we're just tourists, so we just whip out the cell phone.
So when you go in here, is this the mound on the natural mound that he is coring through, or are
No,
these
these are
blocks in here, or
these
what?
are this is all cored through limestone blocks. So these are all masonry blocks, the masonry layers.
Okay.
So if I back it up to the entranceway here, so this is, you can see where it starts here. These are all masonry
Right.
blocks, and you can get an indication of just how big they are. And some of this limestone
Okay.
isn't soft limestone. Some of it's actually a different type of
Sure.
limestone that's quite hard.
There it's noticeable, but once we got in, it almost got indiscernible.
Yeah, well, I think the work on the inside isn't as precise as the work on the outside, but this is still just all blocks of masonry that have been
Okay.
cut through, just hammered through, I believe, manually.
I'm
But
going to
it's
be asking you questions. I've never been there. You have, so.
yeah, check it out. It's you can see some of the blocks, and I think there's been a lot of work been done in here. It's a little shaky, but that's a big block. I think there's a line in there. Yeah, it's all.
I saw one seam there.
And I wouldn't be surprised if it's been plastered and cemented over just on the wall.
Sure.
This is very old. This is very old.
Are we making some jokes with Yusuf? Yeah. So this is the junction area.
I also have a video from the subterranean chamber.
So if you stop here, so looking down here is the passageway, I believe, that goes down and straight to the Queen's Chamber, and also down to the subterranean chamber, I want to say, because the first time I was in Egypt, I went down into the Queen's Chamber and the subterranean chamber, but I don't have footage of that. I have some from the descending passageway, but this was from a visit a couple of years after that, and we only had access to the Grand Gallery and King's Chamber, which is what normally you have access to if you go and visit the pyramid. They don't let you into the other chambers unless you have special permissions. So this is the plugs towards the front main entrance, is it? Or this is the granite? This isn't granite or lime. This is limestone ahead of it.
The front one
Yeah.
goes from there.
Does this intersect? This intersects up into the. Yeah, clearly I was just as confused about it then as I am now.
I imagine once you get inside of here, it's very kind of confusing.
Yeah, it is. It'll clear up in a minute. I'm just trying to figure it out with you.
Passage right here.
Yeah.
This comes up, or does this go
It goes
towards the
all
front?
the way to the top. We can never understand because this, in my opinion, is more functional, of course, than anything else.
Right.
Right, that's the Chris Dunn.
If you entered from the main door, you would never think that there is more here.
Right.
Because this will only lead you to the subterranean chamber.
Hey, did you, when you went?
Yeah, there you go. So he says if you enter from the main door, you will never know there is more here because the main door only takes you to the subterranean chamber.
Okay.
So then this is, and it is quite remarkable that somehow they tunneled into the junction between these passageways, which, we were talking earlier and you said that maybe this was, Mahmud's hole was a method for people to get out of the pyramid, which it seems to me that that's a strong possibility just because this is the junction between these passageways. It's a weird coincidence that the one hole you drill into the pyramid, you somehow miraculously kind of hit the part that connects all these different areas together.
And I've actually read a couple articles. I think Ralph Ellis wrote one of them that was in Ancient Origins website about how he very clearly tells you why this is an exit, not an entrance originally.
Right.
But I don't know. That's all up for speculation, I guess.
Yeah, everything about this place is it's
Right.
hard to pin anything down. You would have done a lot more actually of that type of research than I have. I've read a fair bit about it, and I like Chris Dunn's approach to it, which is very much like an explanation for the different features.
To Peru, did you go to further north? It's kind of harder to get to.
So now this is the what they call the ascending passageway. So this is from that junction. You go up what is your atypical pyramid passageway, and this now ascends up to the Grand Gallery from Mahmud's hole. Yeah.
You want some light, Luke?
No, we're just looking at this white stone here.
It's just probably mute that. Trying to figure out my torch. I would also, if you ever go to Egypt, a tip for the new players: bring a torch, bring a bright torch. Like I actually, this is a mountain biking torch, like a helmet mountain biking torch. It puts out like a car headlight type of light. Highly recommended for this because you find it's very bright outside, but every time you go into something, it's always super dark and not very well lit by the authorities. Right. So here you go. This is the into the Grand Gallery, which is just stunning.
is coming.
Sorry.
Yeah, we just had to pause. There's some other people coming. So that
Now, up in this area or
Yeah.
anywhere, do you see anything that would even be considered graffiti from the dynastic Egyptians?
not from the dynastic Egyptians. There's plenty of graffiti from other people.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's lots of
I've seen a lot of that.
yeah, but nothing in here. No, nothing that I've seen. It's really bizarre how there's this absolute lack, and we can talk about. When we get to the end of the Grand Gallery, we can talk about the one piece of what they say is hieroglyphics in there. But I think there's a decent chance Howard Weiss had it done too. There's nothing. From what I understand, and you probably can tell me whether I'm right or wrong. But wasn't the outside just covered in glyphs? Wasn't the original casing stones just either plastered over and covered head to toe in hieroglyphs?
That's kind of the legend of the place, and there's legends of this place, and then how much do the legends relate to true history? I know a lot of people have discussed that, and I made a video that talks about exactly where the casing stones went, and I've never heard of anybody finding any old hieroglyphs or any report of the blocks or drawings of them with the hieroglyphs, so that's a story that's kind of out there and unconfirmed.
Right. Well, for sure, I can tell you there's nothing on the inside, which is not the case in other places. Winisa's pyramid, obviously the pyramid
Right.
texts, and anywhere that was actually a tomb, the Valley of the Kings, a place I've also been. There is just everything they could get into was covered in writing. So which leads me to, and I obviously can't prove it, but one of my strong feelings about this place is that I don't think the dynastic Egyptians were able to get into the pyramid. I think it was there quite likely before their civilization arose, and it remained sealed up throughout their whole period. I mean, I think there's a good chance of that because anything they could get into, they used as tombs. Yeah.
I agree, and I think where they got into, they at least put some rough graffiti, like on the boxes at the Serapeum,
Right.
and I think that's where the term hermetically sealed came from.
Yeah.
Tomb of Hermes.
Yep. So yeah, this is the, and I'm sorry about the footage. I'll flip over to Luke's phone. He has he had a high quality phone. But I want to point out one other thing. This is at the base of the Grand Gallery here, and you actually see there's a door that shuts here, and I believe this is the well shaft that leads down to the grotto. That's here. Let's just see if Yusuf says anything about it. I'll unmute it.
Your torch down here.
Put my torch?
Yeah. You see that passage?
Yeah.
Leads all the way to the
Subterranean. This is the, what is it called? The Well of Souls?
No, that's at
Is that
the
what they
bottom.
call it? No, that's down in the subterranean chamber. Is the
I like how I correct myself in real time here.
One story, and it's very ridiculous, that when they were sealing the subterranean, they made a passage for the people to come out or something like that.
Yeah.
Nobody understands the function of it, but it's carved in the bedrock.
So that's Yusuf was saying that some people say that whole well shaft to the grotto was a method for people to escape out. But the interesting thing about this passage is that it drills down initially through the courses of the pyramid, but then it also continues into the bedrock and connects to the subterranean chamber.
Oh wow!
So it's not the only passageway that's been drilled through not just the pyramid but the bedrock itself.
Yeah.
I think I told you when we met with Zahid Weiss after this thing with Grant Hancock.
Yeah.
I went through that door.
Yeah, we're talking about another thing that's in here in the gallery. Let me flip over.
Now let me ask you this while you're flipping.
Mm-hmm.
When you get inside the bent and the red pyramid, do you notice similarities because they have a similar type grand gallery? I know we're going to talk about that in a later video, but do you notice similarities?
For sure, yeah. And I've not been inside the bent pyramid, but the red pyramid a couple different times. Apparently, you can now. I think it's difficult to do. It's like the getting under the step pyramid, also quite difficult to do.
Sure.
But the red pyramid, absolutely. The red pyramid has it's actually one of the best pyramids to go visit, I think, because there's very few people seem to be out there. Every time I've gone in there, it's been really just us only us on the site. It was really just us at Dashur, which is a surreal experience. There's like 4 people
Right.
walking around there, sure. But yeah, descending passageway that comes from like a more traditional entrance up higher. It's in the same sort of spot as on the Great Pyramid. That entrance goes straight down, and then you have this a giant corbelled ceiling. But it's not as grand as the Great Pyramid, and the ceiling and the room in the Red Pyramid is horizontally level, versus you have this ascending great. This is actually, so this footage here is walking up the Grand Gallery in the Great Pyramid. But in the Red Pyramid, it's both not as long and flat. It's flat. It doesn't have this angle to it that this one does. But this is this is a pretty surreal experience being in here. I like this little clip of me actually. This is that torch that I was playing with.
Niches cut in the side there,
Pardon?
evenly spaced on
Yeah.
the ledge there.
The niches, yeah. So we actually get a close look at some of these. This is very interesting, these niches. And one thing to remember too is that these stairs that's all added afterwards. The rail and the stairs. Originally this place had no stairs, and it would have been real difficult to move around in as a human, which makes you think, okay, are we really humans going in and out of here, or is it more a machine? And these cogs certainly seem like they're functional.
Absolutely, yeah.
And in fact, they have some interesting masonry work right in front of these cogs. They have these vertical bits of stone, and you'll see that in a minute. I believe, if I recall, this.
This also
Here he goes.
is a mystery. What's the function of these bits?
See that? They've got this like vertical piece cut into them, and so that you can actually, that's straight up and down this piece here, and I'm not sure what the stone is for, but that you can see that's the angle of the entire room.
Okay, I got it. Yep.
And these pieces of stones locked into the other stone. What would be the function of something like that?
Yeah, what was there ever anything found in these grooves or nothing?
And this filled with another stone. Look. That's another slab. Locked in also from the lower level.
Right, and yeah, you can definitely see the tool marks on it.
I do not understand the function of it.
I love Yusuf. He learns something every time he goes in here. He tells me, and he's been in here an awful lot, and he sort of finds something new to wonder about every time.
That's pretty darn cool.
So this, at the end of the Grand Gallery, is also where the entranceway to at the very top left-hand corner up there. Let me just back that up a little touch. Yeah, so the very top left-hand corner up there is the entranceway to what's I know them as the relieving chambers. What else? You had a name for them, Chuck? You said.
Campbell's chamber was one name that I thought I would guess at. I can't remember what they are. John Anthony West calls them resonance chambers up above the King's Chamber.
Yes, so that's the entranceway to there. You have to get this rickety series of ladders and sort of zigzag your way up this. It's actually really tall. It's quite intimidating, I'd imagine, to be up that high, but then crawl into a little hole that's up in the top left-hand corner of the roof there, and then that gets you into those series of chambers where they then cut a little passageway to go up into those respective chambers. And
now, is that little hole something that was quarried through, or was that always open, or how did people get there originally?
I think it was opened. I don't believe it was always there. I think it was done by one of the early explorers. I might be wrong.
Weiss, maybe back in the 18th.
Yeah. Well, he was the one credited with discovering them, I'm pretty sure. And this is where some of the controversy comes in too. So maybe it's worth detouring a minute into that, because in one of those chambers, and I know, Chuck, you had an image of one of those chambers. Do you want to throw that up real quick? And I can
All
stop
right.
sharing. I will stop sharing.
Let me go over and figure out my stuff here.
Yeah, and so from what I understand, there we are, Campbell's chamber. So Campbell's chamber is the top one. So yeah, you can actually see in this diagram where the end of the Grand Gallery is, right on the right hand side, and then that's the passageways are at the very tippy top of the roof of the Grand Gallery that leads you into the first of those chambers that sit above the King's Chamber.
And I think this is where the credit to Khufu comes in. Red ochre cartouche that is kind of poorly well done was discovered up in a place that is basically an attic of this place, and they credit that with building of the whole place.
That's right, the Friends of Khufu thing. Yeah, and it's so, and the controversy for me comes in when you get into the backstory around Howard Weiss and what he was doing at the time. Like, he was very, I believe, and this is again, I could have done some research before talking about this, but from memory, I believe he was under some pressure to gain and make a discovery in order to get more backers to continue his work at Giza, because I imagine this is
Okay.
this has got to be something you want to do. I can imagine the pressure on trying to do that. And I believe it was either
Right.
some lord or lady or some royal, it was something to do with an aristocrat. Someone, his backers needed some discovery, so he was under a fair bit of pressure to do it. And this red cartouche, this red ochre paint came at a good time for Howard Weiss, I think. And then him coming and saying, well, now we've tied the place to Khufu, Friends of Khufu, whatever. There's a lot of controversy around that, which is why a few years ago you had a well-publicized case of some Germans that got in there and got a tiny little flake of red paint off one of these chambers. They hired the pyramid out for a couple of hours, which you can do. They probably found a guy that had the ladders to get up in there, and they got up in there and they chipped off a little tiny piece of, or just a tiny fleck of paint from a very unobtrusive area of where this cartouche was, with the intent of analyzing it. And I don't even know what happened after that. The whole world sort of caught on fire for a while. In
The
this
stuff hit the
segment,
fan. Yes.
it did, yeah. And I recall when it happened, 'cause we were actually in contact for a while. I've exchanged emails, and I know Luke has as well, with the one of the Germans who was part of that two-man group that did
Oh
it.
wow.
They don't speak much English. They've had a few interviews that are in German. I just haven't followed up on it in quite a while. I'd love to hear what happened, but yeah, that's got everybody's pants on fire. That whole episode.
Wow, I would love to talk to one of those guys, but
Yeah, me too.
sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Right. Yeah, we need somebody who does. That'd be fun. Because I do still have their contact details. We could probably try and follow up. I've honestly not gone down and found out if they've talked to somebody, or if they've they've had that discussion somewhere. I haven't seen it, but I would love to talk to them and find out myself as well.
But I don't think anything ever came of that, or any research study was announced on that, right?
Nothing.
Or any.
Yeah, nothing that I know. It's so hard to. I mean, you're already just questionable kind of scientific method, just the whole circumstances surrounding it, right? But and no matter what you find, I think the whole thing was set up. Zahi was always going to throw shade on all of it from the start, which
Right,
is
right.
kind of normal.
But anyway, what I wanted to mention about this, the way this is situated above the King's Chamber here, and I made a video on this. I just think what is represented above here is a representative of the Jed Pillar, one of the oldest symbols in Egypt, or
yes.
what became Egypt, and right above the empty sarcophagus in the western side of the King's Chamber. I think that's all symbolic.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to mention. I know you look at things in a kind of a more technical, functional type way, but I think it could all fit.
I think you're right. I mean, it definitely looks like a Jed pillar. I'm just looking at it and seeing a Jed pillar. It's you're right.
And
That's
there's
very symbolic.
and there's an important story about during the night when the Jed pillar stands straight up, and that's supposed to be the backbone of Osiris. And when Orion, there's a certain point in the night sky where Orion is standing straight up in that sky, and it represents that time of night. To me, that's what it represents.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd throw that in there. People
No,
can buy it or think about it or do whatever they want with it.
I love that sort of stuff. I honestly have one of the things I go to, and I just kind of touched on this in my last video on South American architecture, because again, this is something that Ancient Architects channel and Brian Forrester have looked at. I'm sure you have too, which is there's this symbolic interpretation of a lot of this architecture, and there are shapes in it all over the place. I keep coming back to this. Is it what's first? Is it the chicken or the egg? Did we do we create the symbology based on the shapes we see, or has the symbology driven the architecture to put those shapes into it? Because it's always
Right.
a subjective interpretation. It's funny.
I think that's a good point to bring up, but in my opinion, I think it's the very earliest myths that got these civilizations going that created some of this architecture.
Yep. I think so. I think there's a connection. To me, I've made this distinction in some comment discussions here and there, but one of the things that Yusuf points out, and I agree with him, is that we have what I like to call these precision objects that I think are totally evidence for a lost ancient form of high technology, whether it was whatever civilization it was. I don't believe the Egyptians as we know them were capable of it. And these objects come to us from something before that. Some of those objects include the statues, and those all have a very descriptive. You can stop screen sharing, anytime you want. And
Okay.
I'll start up again. But
All right, I
those,
was fiddling.
it's all good. And I think those statues, there's a connection between the pyramid builders and the later dynastic Egyptians, because I think they modeled themselves after that culture. I think there's some of those statues that are absolutely from the builder period, and so I think there's a real connection when it comes to symbology and the culture. And I think the same thing is quite likely in South America, where you do need a bit more sort of interpretation to see some of the shapes. And I think the Inca were a little liberal in how they interpreted shapes, because it's not just the architecture where they saw shapes, they also see shapes in just the hillsides, the mountains, and the environment around
Right.
as well. And I think it's just how they connected their spirituality with the reality of the world around them. I think it was just all formed a belief system for them.
Right. A lot of that up in Mexico too, with the Olmecs and then the Mayans and whoever else.
Exactly.
Yep.
Let me unmute.
Well, at one level, this was a great accomplishment.
Yes.
After many years of not knowing what is this about or what does this say, so to find finally the translation of lots of the hieroglyphics. I cannot say all of it is translated correct.
Right.
Lots of it is translated in a good way. So they thought that this is the top of what we can reach if we can translate this, but it's not. Because machining.
So one thing, this is where it is some of this graffiti that's on the wall here. This is like the English and later period graffiti right at the top here. One thing that I will point out here that I would love to see somebody find for me on maps or on diagrams of the pyramids, because I don't believe it exists. I've talked about this in previous podcasts. I've never really got to a straight answer with it. But as you exit the Grand Gallery here, and you go under this portcullis area, there's this grate. There's a door and a passageway to the right. This is going towards the King's Chamber, and this is a real mystery. Like this doesn't appear on diagrams. It appears, you'll see this here as we shine a torch into it. I have some footage of it from my phone as well. But there's a passageway behind here, and it seems to cut behind the King's Chamber, and maybe disappears around that corner over there. You can kind of see that.
I can see back in there. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Now, is there other places along with this that there are grates, or there's obviously things blocking passages that we don't know about?
Well, not that we don't know about. They always have a grate that stops you getting down to the Queen's Chamber and the subterranean chamber there, and that's just the special permission grate. But there's this grate here that, and there was the grate at the bottom of the Grand Gallery to the well shaft. But this to me is something of a mystery. I don't know what this is supposed to be or where it goes.
Wow. Well, just the fact that you get a glimpse of it.
Right. Yeah, and not the best equipment in the world. Like you're not allowed to take cameras in there. They won't take your phone off you, at least. So that's what we're limited to using. Although phones, I think, are getting much better. So then you see that's the straight passageway to the King's Chamber. But yeah, there's this weird thing off to the side, the right-hand side.
And you can't see any back wall back there, or it just goes.
No, let me try. Because I believe I have a little footage of it here as well. Yeah, so this is from my phone. This is, yeah, this is it here. So ascending passageway, grand gallery, and then there's this whole, yeah. So this is looking through that. Where is that? No, that's sorry. That's to the Queen's Chamber. That's at the bottom of the grand gallery. Let me just speed up here. We'll go up through the grand gallery, which we've already seen most of. Just me just so here we go. So this is then right at the top.
Translated like this.
So yeah, this is the again another view from this weird little side passage.
See that? Sound vibration.
I love that when Luke made that little peeping noise. It made me
In
laugh.
here, if you stood up,
Yeah. So, yeah. Little
I
strange.
imagine the sound reverberations in there are like no place you've ever been into.
Yeah. So there's a little. Let me play this a little bit because I think we play with that a little bit just here. So if you can hear that fine at your end.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
turn it around. You see there is an up like it was in Peru.
Yeah. Wow.
This is what's labeled as a resonance valve by Dr. Christopher Dunn. Cannot be just a coincidence. So you know the official story about this? When they think they put the barrier on the inside,
Right.
Yeah.
and then they moved, and then there used to be wheels or like with wood and the ropes. I don't believe it. This is all also, in my opinion, is an imagination. Where is the wheel on the other side?
Right.
You know what I mean? Has to be. Has to be another wheel on the other side. And this, if this they think it's for sliding, but what about this? This definitely, or not definitely, it's not like forbidden right now so far. But this looks like what can also be functional as vibration, sound resonance. Now that's granite.
Yeah. So, giving away some of the resonance stuff that I'm going to get into in the video. There's some really good recordings of it in here. I have a better
I've
microphone.
never seen that right there.
Yeah, so that's in the portcullis
strange.
area. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll keep it playing. I'll just cut the volume for a second. So this is in that standing area in between and just in the little horizontal passageway leading into the King's Chamber.
Okay. Now, is all this granite here that we're
granite.
seeing?
Yeah, all granite, and so was that channel pattern. That was all granite. And then this is
Now, do you see any evidence of any kind of burnt material or soot on the ceiling? How do you think they saw in here?
there is some weird markings, both in
Because I
the
do see some darkness on some of the ceiling areas,
Yeah.
but I was just wondering. That's a common question I get.
Yeah, and so I think if I go back and look at some of the footage, maybe we can do it again sometime. But it's as you come out of at the top of the Grand Gallery, it's almost as if the stone's been discolored. It almost looks like there was a fire. I mean, just in terms of the coloration of the stone as you progress out of the granite area and into the limestone area.
Fire?
Yeah, like
fire
it almost
heat.
looks burnt or heat, perhaps. Yeah, it looks like it's been heat treated. The stone looks vitrified, and a lot of this stone is all vitrified to me, as in it has that shiny surface, very similar to South American architecture, but that's also a common finishing technique that the builders seem to have used. And then
You're not talking. You're not talking shiny like the Serapeum boxes.
No, not that shiny, but smooth and reflective still. Like does. See the lights? See it
Yep.
up there. Like
Yep.
just that little moment there where you can see the torchlight reflected on the wall. Like that's not natural for granite. You have to either the stone is vitrified or it's polished to some degree, but it's not the mirror finish that you find in the Serapeum. Although the granite box is quite high quality. This is funny actually. So this is the shaft.
And did you know that now they will have photos in the Egyptian museum?
Give us a little torch here, mate. Oh, I found ancient water bottles.
Whoa.
That is just a crying shame.
Isn't that cool? Like those shafts are just nuts, and
I'm getting blown away looking at this here. But is there a seam below the shaft and then not one above? Is that what I was seeing?
Yep. It's actually it's cut into these two blocks.
Okay.
Here, and then it sits right on. It's basically formed from these two blocks to the bottom, and then it's the top block sits on top.
Oh.
And you can see how deep it goes. There's the seam back there for each granite piece. There's 70-ton granite blocks. You know, this is.
All the way to the surface outside. How many blocks are used?
Now is that? Do you know what side of the King's Chamber that is on? Right off the top of your head.
That one's on the as you walk into the right-hand side. That's the square one, and on the one on the left-hand side has the fan in it, and we take a look at that too. That's a big round hole.
Is that opposite the sarcophagus, or is that on the south wall then?
It's here. I'll show you in this clip. Probably has a better look. Let's go into the King's Chamber here. Actually, no, I don't. I thought I did have.
Okay.
Do I? Let me
Because
just make sure that I'm not.
I have a video. I have a video in the works where I'm going to try to explain the 4 shafts, and part of my research is which side of the King's Chamber they are on exactly.
So if I back this up, this was as you come in. So as you come in, I'll pause this here when we get in. So as you come in, you can see. So there's the giant hole. Like this is where the one side of the fan is in there. We come back to that. But so that's the left-hand side shaft.
Yep. Okay.
And so that's the box.
That's the west. The box is on the west side. That's all I know. So okay.
Yeah. So as you
that'd be
come
the
in,
south side then.
right, and then you walk forward, and there's the shaft. Right, it's right here.
And
So
and that's on the north side, and that's very important. And I'll
west.
be talking about that in the video then.
Right. So yes, this is the north side shaft.
Give us a little torch here, mate.
But that's some great footage there, Ben.
Yeah, this is
I've never seen that look up there like that.
Yeah, including the water bottles from some tourist. I love them. Jesus, come on, people! Don't use the pyramid as a trash can, please.
Right, that'll be bad juju in the afterlife.
Yeah, well, Yusuf makes a good point here. If you can understand him over the resonance in this chamber, it's such a surreal experience. And this is the thing, like Chris Dunn in his book talks about being able to crystal clear hear somebody speaking at the bottom of the Grand Gallery from up in the King's Chamber. And also that if you talk in the King's Chamber, it goes down through the well shaft and you can hear it in the subterranean chamber. And
that subterranean chamber is 12 stories below the main course of the pyramid, right?
Yep, that's down there in the bedrock.
And one thing I just wanted you to touch on now, you're in the King's Chamber, and it is actually, I know I've heard John Anthony West talk about this, and you just mentioned this, it's actually hard to have a conversation because the reverberation is literally bouncing everywhere.
Exactly if you can, that's what I said, if you can understand Yusuf here, just over the resonance, try and do it, because he's trying to make a point about how many blocks, so this shaft that goes all the way to the outside, he's trying to basically point out, like, how many blocks does it take to perfectly carve through and design in order to get that. Like he's just trying to make a point about it. But listen to him trying to say it in the reverb of this environment. It's
something
crazy.
I've always wondered. Yeah, okay.
I have a few other clips from earlier visits where I was in there on my own and just like slapping the ground, and it just echoes for seconds and seconds afterwards.
Wow.
Just like, it's crazy.
pitch black by the time you go out of the surface.
There's no light.
So imagine the challenge with this huge structure to do that, and then another one on the other side.
Now, they've done something back here, right? To the floor.
All this part was once open.
Yeah, look at this cement. It's all
So, what is the explanation? The ancient Egyptians ran out of granite?
Yeah. So yeah, that's the steel plate that covers up the cavity that's in the northwestern corner of the King's Chamber that very few people know about.
That just, my mind is racing.
Yeah, it's interesting, huh? Let's I believe I have some footage from. Let's get to where people can stand. Okay, so here we go. This is the walking up section. I don't know why I don't have audio. Why is there no audio there?
Turn off my phone here.
There we go. So let's skip forward. We come in and this is where I get to take a look with my phone and a torch and try and take it. It was really interesting. I did share this on a podcast on Pukaje. It hasn't had many views, but it's still there was still a number of people that had photographs of in the 80s and 90s from back here and what is back in this room. And I've got some. We can zoom in and look at it, but there's clearly a cavity.
Right. Wow.
And and there's actually what looks like you will see some interesting things here. I'll pause it when we get to it. But,
this might be leading to a question I have coming here, but it's on the tip of my tongue.
What's that?
We see a lot of the Great Pyramid here as just being perfectly done. Do you think there are maybe areas that are just kind of crudely, roughly done that were never meant to be seen, like we see in some pyramids?
I think so. Yeah, for sure. There's. I know that even the relieving the chambers above the King's Chamber, one side of those granite blocks are very rough, and I know that some of the masonry, as you go further into the pyramid, isn't as precise as the outside, from my understanding. I think that might be. I know I've got some more footage.
In your opinion, the chambers up above the King's Chamber were never meant to get into, then?
As far as I know, I don't. That
seems like an attic to me. Just something that wasn't never meant to be gotten into, and maybe was meant to resemble something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's where that or whatever the Khufu thing was found.
Yeah,
and I don't think that was ever meant to be found. And if a pharaoh would have built this place, he would have put his name all over it.
I think so too. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Let me try and do this again.
Now, does anything in the King's Chamber look like it was done recently, just for the purpose of people coming up here and tourists?
Well, this was definitely.
Or is it all granite? And I mean, is there any added cement in here anywhere?
Here we go. Just this area. There's definitely cement on the floor here. So here we go. This is it here. So you can see in here, like this is actually, I think that's a piece of angle iron in there.
Okay.
There we go. That's a piece of angle iron. And then, but to me, what the mystery is this wall here looks like it's finished rock. Like it looks like it's, see there? I don't know what that to me looks like, a block of limestone. So whether or not it's, you just don't know whether this is something that was made in the pyramid or it was something that was dug at some point later in the past. I know this was excavated at one point, and it's.
Do I see seams on those?
That's
or
what
is that just?
that's
Is
what
my computer screen just dirty here?
that's what it looks like to me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like a seam and then a floor. And I've
Okay.
actually I do have pictures from people that have been down in there at that have got some decent pictures. There's a bricked up section of a wall, so there was a further passageway, and there are diagrams. Matt on Ancient Architects has a good video looking into the history of some of that stuff, and some of the where it is on some diagrams. But there's definitely a chamber. It's just a real mystery. Like, we just don't know. But you can tell from here, for example, when you walk up, like this whole area here, this has all been concreted in. So this whole line here, this whole section along that north wall has all been removed and replaced. And you can see this here. In fact, you see Yusuf's just stamps on this, and you hear it.
And then another one on the other side.
Now, they've done something back here, right? To the floor.
Was once open.
See him stomp on this panel here. Yeah, so this is all steel. It's meant to look like granite, and you can see all the concrete in the floor where all the blocks have been replaced.
Cement.
And actually, the funny thing is, on the wall here, that north wall is the one block that isn't under any load. It has a block above it that's supported by two side blocks, and they think that this block is probably, it can be removed, and maybe that's how they got the sarcophagus in. The box. Yeah, but so this behind this air conditioner, one of the blocks in this wall is non-load bearing, and they think it can be removed. So
Because I'm trying to remember my research, the empty sarcophagus had to be in there before this place was completely finished. Yeah.
Yep. It's too
Okay,
big.
that is interesting.
Yeah, but there is a block that is the right size, that it's in the wall here. I don't know if we have a footage of it, but if you look at the diagrams, there's definitely one of the blocks in that north wall isn't load bearing, so it could be removed without the thing falling down.
Okay.
That's interesting. Other features here. Let's just skip through this. There's
Well,
machining. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. Sorry to talk over you, but I just want to say it's for the theory that this was built by the Egyptians about 4,500 years ago. That's very impressive copper tool work in that King's Pyramid. That's one of the remarkable feats of all time.
It really is, yeah. It's incredible granite workmanship that just doesn't. This is a civilization that the Egyptologists will tell you didn't have the ability to quarry this stone. It's a bit befuddling how you can attribute that type of a civilization to doing this type of work. And actually, it's a funny point, because I was looking at some other videos in some areas around Giza, and in some of these chambers, there's hieroglyphs, and it's going to be in my next video, but Yusuf talks about the fact that they called themselves the builders of the pyramid city. They never call themselves the builders of the pyramid, but they're builders of the pyramid city, which is obviously what sprung up around these pyramids. And there are some of these, these false doors, what look like false doors, in a lot of these different areas that are made from limestone, and the paint that's still on them, it's dabbed with this ochre paint and in a certain way to make it look like granite. Like, they're actually... The people that were building at Giza were trying to make their stuff look like granite. You'd think, well, how come they don't just use granite? Apparently they made all this stuff with granite. Why couldn't they just use granite?
Now, what is the smoothness of the granite in the King's Chamber compared to granite you see in other places of Egypt that obviously came from Aswan? Is it just as smooth, or is it very similar? Or
it's the granite, the finishing on this the box. It's very dark.
And the walls.
The walls. I think it's all the same. It's incredible degree of finishing. It looks very smooth. I haven't seen any measurements, but there's actually machining marks on the box itself, and I have some pretty good footage of them. So see, if you look in there, you can actually see it.
Grooves,
it's hard to see. It's like a machining groove, right?
Perpendicular grooves, or
these are horizontal grooves right here. If you just, I know it's probably real small for you to see on your screen, but I'll back that up a bit. But you can see drawing this line here, and then I've got some better footage of it on my camera, just being in the portrait mode. But yeah, you can see this groove along the top. To me, these are clear machining marks. It's something that you do see on a lot of the high technology objects. You see them on slabs, on statues, on boxes. There's also circular saw drill holes, but these have been filled up with some substance, like whether it's wax or something, but there are these holes on top of this box. Now these have been, maybe they've held candles in the past or something like that. And then there's some machining that actually looks like the way that the lid was slid on. There's actually a stopper on the top of the box itself that looks like it was the way that the lid was slid on. And in fact, Yusuf just kind of figures this out while we're in here. It's like a new thing he hadn't quite seen before.
I'd like to hang out with Yusuf for an evening.
He's a great guy. Yeah,
he seems very good-natured and also tremendously knowledgeable.
Fantastic guy, very hospitable as well. If you get to know him, he's you know, him and his brother and his friends, they all jam at his place. I've had a couple evenings hanging out with him. It's a real good time. Yeah, and he has his, obviously his father was quite famous. They have a store that's right there in Giza. It's the family home. It's like 5 stories high. It basically looks out at the pyramids and the Sphinx. It's across the road from them in Giza, basically. And it's pretty surreal to sit out there at night on his balcony, and you can watch the light show that they play over the Sphinx every night. And it's a big theater production with noise and all that, and laser light show, and it's it's a trip.
I was actually down at the Sphinx today at Luxor.
Nice.
On the Strip, yes. I tried to get under it, but all I found was a couple German guys smoking a joint, so I left them alone.
That's probably what's under the port of the Sphinx as well at this point. So this is, you can see the flatness of the top here, and I think he mentions it.
Yeah. And it looks like slid in.
It's certainly, something's happened to this box, you know. It's to me, the box definitely. So this is, here you go, perfect shot actually. So this is from my phone. The last little bit, looking at the side of the box here. I do a lot of up close scanning with the phone, but you kind of get the idea. You can see the machining.
I got it right there. Yep.
Yep. So to me, this is like, all right, there's something else going on back in the day, and this box is very similar to the other boxes, just a bit smaller. But yeah, it's another box site, you know. It's as with Abu Ghraib and Zaywad Al Iran with the subterranean boxes, the pyramids seem to have boxes that aren't subterranean. To me, it's whether it's some evolution or different design of a similar technology that involved these boxes, and then you've got the Serapeum and everything else. I mean, even the Valley of the Kings, there's giant boxes. I mean, Brian Forrester showed one of those in one of his recent videos.
The quartzite content of those granite blocks I find interesting, and I don't know if you've ever heard my study on magnetite and how. But magnetite, we have billions and billions of magnetite cells in our brain. They're these really tiny crystals. They're not cells, but they're tiny crystals.
Yeah.
And they are affected by the environment we are in. And if we are in an environment that is maybe kind of like the King's Chamber, it actually has a direct effect on these crystals in your brain. Yep. And one of the things they theorize that this affects is your pineal gland.
Right.
So this is a thing that I've made a couple videos about in my Tuma Hermes and Tuma Thoth videos, where I don't say this is an actual tomb. It's just a symbolic tomb of knowledge, of thought, of thinking. That's kind of where I went with that video. But the magnetite is something that I've looked into, and that's kind of a very new thing that people are researching right now. And I just thought it's interesting where it might have an effect, because if you look at Brian Forster's videos, Graham Hancock's videos, John Anthony West videos, and other people, they say that the pyramids were actually places of meditation that had an effect on your consciousness. So it's just something I thought is a possibility that was interesting to bring up.
I happen to agree. It's funny because I've just been researching a bit. As I said, I'm working on a resonance video because I had some interesting harmonic resonance experiences, and I think that there's an awful lot of work that could be done in terms of researching the properties of pyramids, and as well as other structures in that direction. And I know that there's been a lot of people who have, and there's been some real. And Chris Dunn actually talks about it in his book, the Giza power plant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and in fact, the whole thing's tied into resonance and harmonic resonance. It's his theory really revolves around the idea of having the entire structure, the 5 million ton structure, whatever it is, of the pyramid resonating in frequency and in harmonic balance with the Earth itself, and all it takes is a little bit of pressure to get it started. That's how his whole resonance thing works. But there's an interesting phenomena that he talks about in his book called it's the pyramid effect. It's things like, there was people have noticed over the years all sorts of weird things about the pyramid. Things like, a bunch of dead animals that were inside the pyramid didn't seem to decompose. It turns out it's very good for mummification. Plants grow better. There's all this weird sort of correlation around harmonic frequency and standing waves that I think there's a whole areas of research we should be looking at, and some people have started to do that, and some people suggest the entire pyramid itself vibrates at a certain frequency.
Right. I have not read Christopher Dunn's books, but I remember when I just first started looking into ancient Egypt, one of his lectures and one of his interviews was the first things that I ever watched.
Yep.
And I remember after listening to his lecture, I was just going, holy crap, what the heck is, the possibilities just started multiplying in my mind of what this place could have actually been for. And I find his work very interesting. I haven't looked into it as much as some other areas, but definitely a big part of the puzzle, maybe.
Yeah, I think his is the best theory that goes as far as possible to explaining some of the functional mechanism. I'm still not sure I agree with all of it, because it's still at some level an interpretation from within, our perspective on it. But it's some of the. There's a Tesla story that he tells in the book about Tesla figured out that vibration can do anything, and there's a famous experiment that he once ran where he nearly shook a building apart. And he was asked, what would it take for you to destroy this entire building around us? And he said, 6 pounds of air pressure just to get it started. And apparently he did this experiment, and he had to smash the machine to break it apart. But he basically created a vibrating machine that vibrated and resonated at the right frequency to match the building he was in, and the building started shaking apart. Like he had to smash the machine. They called the cops, and he just said, must have been an earthquake or something. But famous Tesla experiment saying that there's a lot to vibrations and harmonics. And again, it's just one of those areas I don't think we do enough mainstream research in those areas as applied to these sites.
But I know we have not talked about magnetite before, but
no.
If you are looking into a future video, check it out, because I think you might find something you're finding that very interesting.
Yeah, I will, because he gets into crystals and that because there's that's piezoelectricity, right? The right harmonic effect through crystals creates a current and et cetera, et cetera. Anyhow,
and also at Sogmatar, a place I have talked about on my channel, there was I think it was a Russian team was out there, and they did some really strange magnetic testing on how it really affected the human brain.
Right.
And that lone site out there in the middle of nowhere, they found that. And that link is on a lot of my videos, so that is one thing I found really interesting about that place.
I've watched some of your Sagmatar stuff. Yeah, it's excellent. It's not something that I know much about, but you're just a fountain of knowledge when it comes to those things. You've got quite a lot of research.
Well, that place I found on Google Earth, and it took me 2 days to figure out what the heck I was looking at.
That's right.
That's how mysterious it was to me at the beginning.
And NEXT is the other guy that turned up out there, right?
Yep.
Yes. So I was talking with Matt from Ancient Architects today, and he said that he's a good guy. I'd love to reach out and talk to him at some point.
A lot of good researchers out there.
Yeah. So there was a look at the roof. Let's just do one more thing, and we can maybe wrap this up. But I wanted to maybe take a look at, I believe, here we go. So this is the other side of the shaft. So you can clearly see this shaft behind Yusuf in the wall. And by the way, we had a look at the ceiling there for a minute, which is just spectacular in this chamber. Just to think, they lifted those blocks. They're already 100. King's Chamber is already 150 feet above ground level, and let's not forget that the Giza plateau itself is a couple hundred feet above. It's a plateau. It's above where the river would have been by quite some distance. But also here on the other side of the chamber is this fan. It doesn't run, but it's hooked up to this. It's in the area for this shaft, and you can actually see the original shaft passageway on the bottom.
Are we looking? So we're looking just up then,
South. We're looking onto the south wall, opposite side from the shaft.
under the south wall. Okay, okay.
At the south wall, this is the other side star shaft, and you can see the original size was probably the same as what was on the north wall, but this has all been hammered out for some reason, and they've
Sure.
shoved this fan in there, and I'm trying to get a look behind it. It's like a man-sized hole. Well, see, this is the tube. Look, you see
Yeah, I see.
but it does narrow down, that's for sure.
Look what we did.
Yeah, and none of the electronics in there seem to work. All the lights, it's always very dim. But it's a cool place to hang out. I've had the chance to be in this chamber for 45 minutes on my own on one visit. That was pretty special.
I've done a video on the sacred mathematics in the place, just the layout of the King's Chamber. Well, I think a lot of thought was gone into every single passageway and
Yeah.
chamber, and
Yeah, I
but
think
no glyphs, no hieroglyphs. I think that
Yeah,
speaks volumes that the dynastic Egyptians never got into here, because they would have put crude hieroglyphs at least. They would have put a little monument inside of this place. They would have done something.
they would
you
have,
know.
yeah, if nothing else, probably just put plaster over the walls and,
Khufu,
put-
if Khufu built this place, he wouldn't have just left a symbolic ceremonial boat outside in a pit.
No, and a what is it, a 2-inch or 3-inch statue? That's the other connecting rod that they found
Right.
down at the Sphinx at the Valley Temple. And I've got pictures
And-
of that little statue of Khufu. It's like, this is how they attribute the pyramid.
And do you think that statue, just how small it was really all that was never found in the thousands of years? It just happened to be there.
Right.
Got lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Just got lucky this time. Yeah, it's a strange thing, isn't it? I mean, the whole silly idea that they're tombs. I mentioned the concept of labels, and it's just it's an exercise in labeling. I mean, there's so many logical holes in it. I mean, how many tombs did Sneferu need? I mean, he's how many pyramids does he have? 3 or 4? I mean, it's just silly.
He's got it's very strange, because I've looked into even some more Sneferu pyramids, and he's maybe a half a dozen they think might be his, so that's ridiculous. And some of the larger ones too, and I'm sure we'll talk about those in the future.
Indeed. Well, that's the end of the footage I've got for this. There's other areas of the Great Pyramid that we can explore, but I think that's probably a good look at it for now. And actually, here's something for you to look at. One last thing. This is the burn marks, the discoloration on the granite, and this is so you can see this passageway here comes from the King's Chamber, and then over here is off to that side passageway. You can clearly see there's been some sort of heat or some effect that's hit this granite from the direction of the King's Chamber. Now maybe I'll just let me unmute it and see if Yusuf has something to say about it. Maybe, yeah. But you can see that different discoloration. This is what I was talking about with the colors in the stone coming from the King's Chamber. Well, the other thing that always mystified me about it is the fact that the entire chamber seems to have been expanded out 1 inch, like it's been pushed outwards in all directions by about 1 inch. I think
Just from time.
Well, they say probably from earthquakes, but the idea that there was some pressure in there, and almost as if it was an explosion, would explain possibly how all of those blocks have moved outwards 1 inch. There's been I'll have to look it up to find the reference for it, but there is a calculation and measurement somebody did that's shown that the entire chamber has kind of been bulged out by 1 inch, like pushed out. Something happened in there.
Couple questions. Excuse me, couple questions for you then. In the King's Chamber, do you feel different, like mentally, when you're in there? Do you have a different state awareness or anything that is different than when you're outside?
It is full seat of the pants response to that. I mean, I can only say yes because it's something that I felt though in a few other places. I mentioned it in my Napahuaca video as something that seems to happen on these sites. There's a real, not something I was ever expecting before going to Egypt. There's a real right brain connection to these sites. There's an emotional connection to these sites, and it's definitely a. I feel something, but I don't know if that's just me being excited, because I'm there and I'm enjoying myself so much, or I'm just.
Is it any different being? I know you've been inside the sarcophagus. Is it different being in there, or do you get a different state of meditation that you start really going places you don't normally go?
I tried. I had a bit of a transcendent, like a transcendent experience in there myself, because I was in there for about 45 minutes on my own. It just happened to be a slow day. I rolled up, took a ticket, and went in there and just stayed in there for a while. And I probably spent a good 25 minutes just laying in that box with my eyes shut, just breathing and trying to do that. And it was a special little period.
I'll bet.
But yeah, it's hard for me to it was subjective. It was all my experience. Certainly other people have had experiences like that. Quite famously, Napoleon apparently had quite an experience. He spent a night in there. So
right.
Yeah.
His whole deal's been a little misunderstood. People think he actually shot off the nose of the Sphinx and all this stuff, but he actually had pretty good respect for the monuments in Egypt and made one of the first great documentary books on it.
Yes.
One other thing I wanted to ask you: when you're inside of this place, just going through the Grand Gallery and stuff, do you feel as though you are inside of a disassembled machine, kind of?
It's hard to say that's the specific feeling of the place, but it definitely feels. I've always felt a little bit like there's some industrial. That's probably the best word for it. I feel like there's some industrial flavor to all of this, like the Serapeum, all these pyramids. They feel functional. It's the straight lines. It seems to be such purpose in what was done, and so confusing in terms of it doesn't feel like it's a human space. Like just to get in them is so uncomfortable. The descending passageways, the ascending passageways, the steepness of them, the fact that we've had to add stairs in them to make it even remotely kind of doable for people. There's definitely a feeling that it's alien almost, but sacred at the same time, because I guess that's just my perspective on it. But yeah, there's an industrial flavor to it. I wouldn't say I felt like I was in a machine, but I felt like I was in something.
See, you were in something, all right.
Yeah, it's an astonishing place. I'm just drawn to it too. I want to go back immediately. Like it would be the first thing I would do if I got to Egypt too. I'd roll up and just walk straight up to the plateau and buy my ticket and just probably go in here.
Yeah. If I went to Egypt, I'd love it so much. My family and friends would probably never see me again. I'd love it a lot, I'm sure.
Well, we could put together a fun couple of weeks. It's something I'm thinking about doing for next year. So I know a few people have asked me, but maybe I'm sure. And again, we could use Yusuf is a great guide for a group, and we could definitely put together a fun trip.
Tempt me, Ben. Tempt me.
A little ways away, but something I'm thinking about. Cool. That was fun.
All right. Well, that should wrap it up, huh?
Indeed. Yes. Thanks for that.